Hello, my name is Ben Friedman, host of Ben and Bran See a Movie, and I talked about it last week. Didn't know what this week's show was going to be. I had a few ideas brewing. I always try to base it off the recent movie release day calendar and try to tie it into the movie. Uh, I didn't really have a movie for that this week. There was not a great option for me to review. Paws of Fury was coming out. I thought about what if I talked about the best Michael Cera movies. Then I realized my list would be Scott Pilgrim and Superbad, and that was about it. So I decided that wasn't a particularly viable option. So then I was trying to sit there. I'm like, do I go best Samuel L. Jackson? Like, I don't want to particularly do it for a movie like Paws of Fury, The Legend of Hank, which is a bad title, and in the trailer it doesn't even make sense because they never say the name Hank aloud. And regardless, I had problems with the movie. I didn't care to do it that way, and there was no interest from me to do it. And I didn't want to just talk about a bad movie to talk about a bad movie without Branson here, because that just seems really lame. Ranting about a bad movie for an hour in a podcast form, just not my particular style. So I decided, and this came in large part due to the discourse that happened after Thor Love and Thunder, which I'll get into it. That very much surprised me. I didn't think the discourse was going to be quite like this, but I decided, let's talk about Thor Love and Thunder. Let's talk about the state of the MCU, the problems, what it's still doing right, and let's just try to contextualize everything going on and just try to get an idea. And it's so overreactionary right now. I just want to get an idea of what's going on. Anyway, this is my Thor Love and Thunder video and my 7 issues with the current state of the MCU. Welcome to Ben and Bran See a Movie. I'm your host, Ben Friedman, and join me after a second. All right, hello. My name is Ben Friedman. Thank you guys for joining me today on Ben and Bran See a Movie. We are talking about Thor Love and Thunder, which was a movie I reviewed. What the heck was that I just tried saying? It was a movie that I reviewed last week. It came out Thursday. I believe it was July 5th. I got to see it 5 p.m. at my local theater right after work. I had a pretty, and this is just context, if you've seen the video, you know exactly what my review of the film was. I had a pretty mixed positive response. I eventually just kind of came out of the movie saying it's okay. I liked aspects of the movie. I didn't particularly care for the humor. I didn't like the corniness of it. I didn't like the characterization of Thor. I didn't like the first hour of the film, but then I did concede that the second hour of the film was much better and much more in line of what I liked about Ragnarok plus the previous Thor films. And then I decided, okay, I put out the review, just again for context because it was so interesting. I said at the end of the review, I was going to be in the minority. I thought for sure people would disagree strongly with my review of Thor Love and Thunder. I thought this was going to be a pretty big crowd pleaser, kind of similar to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, a movie I thought was okay, but did really well with the general public. I thought it was going to be much of the same. And what I was shocked with is this movie isn't quite that. And let's just rewind that back for a second. There is an overreaction that happens when you are on the internet. It is either the best movie you've ever seen or it is the worst film you've ever seen. I'm not interested in that crap. Discourse in film criticism online is almost a waste of time. Twitter, Dave Chappelle said it best, Twitter is not a real place. It does not matter. No one thinks the way you do on Twitter. Some of the reactions I've seen on it have been stupid. I mean, my God, the fact that Taika Waititi has gone from like one of the most beloved directors in a week to just being called a hack. Like, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't even make sense. Twitter brings out the worst in people. I couldn't believe it. Somebody I followed literally said, quote for quote, Taika Waititi is a hack and has no talent. I don't care if you dislike this movie. I don't care if you dislike all of his movies. It's pretty bad to just call somebody a hack just point blank like that when they're making the films that they make, when they're putting in any form of passion that you see in film and that you see it played out on the screen and it touches so many people in a very special, meaningful way. You're just bad at your job. If you're simply saying this guy is a hack, that's not real film criticism. You're just simply saying something to cause a reaction out of it. It is film reaction, not film criticism. I think it's insanely annoying. I wouldn't call it frustrating, but it is solely to get hate, and it is solely to breed negativity. I'm never interested in doing that. I have no interest for doing it in this movie. And it's just a factor of what Thor Love and Thunder. You're loved one week, you're then damned by the same people who loved you a week later. And there's also just this weird thing going on where like I said, this person that I ended up unfollowing because just not interested in that type of information on my timeline. And the way they were presented it was so negative and so disgusting that it actually like rubbed me completely the wrong way. And but essentially they were just like, oh, well, if you think this is bad, wait till you hear about Taika on set behavior, like, and then like diva, all these things, and just like, oh yeah, he's never made a good thing. I hate the guy. Basically like making accusations out in the public, and not necessarily accusations like some of the other ones that have come up recently with celebrities, but just like, oh yeah, they're so mean to the crew. Oh, they're mistreated. Oh, this guy's really an asshole behind the line. Like all of that. And it's just like, you're doing that. And then you're just like kind of just sitting there like gloating at the fact that a movie from a franchise you don't like in the MCU is bombing. It's from a director you don't like. And you're just kind of gleefully sitting in it, and you're just like retweeting other people who are thinking this way, and you're kind of just weaponizing the negative response for a movie and kind of using it for your own agenda. It's the issue with journalism in large parts right now where people distrust the media. It's because you see a response like that and you're like, this guy is completely non-biased. And the thing is, he's a pretty well-known guy. I'm not going to use his name. I'm not interested in causing any of that crap. But it's shocking to see someone that has that position of power writing like that. And honestly, if I was somebody hiring him as a critic, those reviews and the way he was presenting himself and the way he was using the discourse and weaponizing it and tagging people, and specifically tagging the creators of Thor, Love and Thunder, just all that, he wouldn't be working under my publication. I think that's a complete embarrassment, and the fact that there is going to be little to no repercussions is shocking. And I'm not talking like the way Jeff Snyder, or even Scott Mendelson, the way they do it, where they'll poke fun, but they always put a little bit of respect, and they usually do have the lines drawn. This one was the full vitriol in it, and it was just so dumb. But anyway, the reason I mentioned this whole aside is because I'm just not interested in having a talk like that about Thor, Love and Thunder. I'm going to say what I liked. I'm going to say what I didn't like. I'm going to say issues that I see, and I'm going to give what I believe is a fair criticism of the movie, but also not stating my word as fact. And I'm just, again, not interested in attacking any of the cast, crew, or workers who are on this film. I will be addressing some things that have come out about Marvel recently that's kind of shocking, but not particularly surprising to me. So we'll get into a little bit of that. There was a pretty damning article from The Gamer, I believe it posted Sunday night, that we're going to get into when we get into my issues with the MCU. But with that, let's just kind of start with Thor, Love and Thunder, because that's the natural starting place. So this is going to be a spoiler review. Everyone watching this, do know that this is a spoiler review. I'm going to spoil Thor Love and Thunder. If you do not want to hear that, stop the video right now and come back after you've seen Thor Love and Thunder. But anyway, 3, 2, 1, spoilers are in effect. Gore the God Butcher is the best part of this movie, and I'm a little sad that they killed him off so quickly. The fact that they did not develop this character over either a few movies or let this movie completely be about him. The fact that he's sharing the screen with Jane Foster becoming the mighty Thor, the fact that there's this whole Zeus to set up Hercules scenes within the movie, it rubbed me the wrong way watching it. I understood the intent, and I think Taika was just balancing too much, and I have a feeling, and this is just a feeling, I can't actually confirm this to be true. My guess is Marvel told him, hey, you need to hit these points. If you want to do these points that your movie had, feel free to do this, but we need you to do this type of movie. And Taika was kind of balancing all of this. We might never know that to be true, but based on the other situations of what's happened with other directors, what we've heard and know about the Sam Raimi situation with Doctor Strange 2, some of the rumors that we've heard about other films like Ant-Man, specifically with the Edgar Wright situation, I have a feeling my statement probably holds some truth, and we're seeing a little bit of that. There was that VFX video that came out with Taika and Tessa Thompson where Taika wasn't familiar with a scene that was in his own movie, and just how Valkyrie's face reacted in that one scene. Again, people are taking it way too seriously. If you're taking Taika fully at his word, you've never seen a Taika Waititi interview or know the guy and how he presents himself to the media, I would take everything he says with a huge grain of salt, because he is so often going for the joke that to fully call that a valid attack that he is taking at the VFX artist or in any way being demeaning to them, I don't think that's the intent. It could have come off a little better. I do think so. But ultimately, I wouldn't read that much into it, and I didn't. But anyway, it all just kind of stems back into this thing that I thought Bale's the best part of the movie. I thought he was terrifying. I thought he was legitimately scary, and the film had this horror vibe to it. And then there was just this inconsistency of tone that you just got from the very beginning with the Asgardians of the Galaxy stuff, with the screaming goats, with Korg narrating, and then Thor doing this like Jean-Claude Van Damme like split on two ships. It's just, it all gets pretty muddled pretty quickly. You go from this really dark opening to this really bright Asgardians of the Galaxy Korg jokes, Taika typical humor. Then you go back to Jane Foster dying. Then you're back to Thor cracking jokes, and then you're back to screaming goats, and then you're back to Jane getting the hammer. All this, and then there's the scary scene. Blah blah blah. It just was all too much, and I think the point was to show that like life is often like that. You know, Jane Foster is going through a very serious situation. Yet she can also laugh. It doesn't always have to be miserable. And I think Taika does find, like his films, finding joy in even the darkest movies. Jojo Rabbit maybe being the best example of that. But in this film, I thought that balance was so off. What he does so well in Jojo Rabbit, or even some of the darker moments in Thor Ragnarok, or just any of other Taika's works, it didn't have that balance for me in this one. I thought it was a comedy through and through. This is probably, arguably, if you're just going pure comedy, this is probably his second funniest pure comedy, just based on the fact that I think What We Do in the Hunt for the Wilder People, that's not a full-on comedy. It has a lot of drama and heart in it. Same with Ragnarok, it's a superhero action movie. Same with JoJo, which is a pretty shocking war film. All of this, I'd say What We Do in the Shadows and Thor Love and Thunder are truly the true comedies that he's made. And I haven't seen Boy, so I can't really comment on that. But based on what I've read and heard about that film, I'd be pretty shocked to believe that is a pure comedy. So I'm going to say it's not. But yeah, there's just something so inconsistent about it, and they didn't do that balance as well as I thought they could. I will say, after seeing this movie a second time, I got to see it with my mom Sunday. The humor worked for me a lot better. I did say in my review, and I will retract that now, that I thought a lot of the jokes were miss. I would actually say more of the jokes hit. I think it's actually a pretty funny film. I was coming off of a long, hard day at work. I had just started my job the day before. I was kind of stressed because I had issues with my ticket. My theater was pretty rowdy and just loud, and people were like, children were just running around. So I was already just kind of stressed about that. So I had a negative experience watching the film as well. So I think I was a little overly harsh when it came to the comedy. Watching it again Sunday, normal crowd, I thought the jokes actually landed pretty well. Again, my issue with the film isn't necessarily its humor. I think the humor actually works. It's just that the humor does devalue some of the dramatic moments in there. And I just wish they had spent more time just allowing those moments to exist. I just wish we had moments where either the stakes just aren't like blown up right away, where there's a really sad scene and then something like comes to like kind of alleviate it right away, or there's a gag just coming like a second after it, or the sad scene like Korg's supposed death is then just set up for a Korg just being his face joke. That stuff didn't particularly work for me. But again, the humor actually it's not, I can't say that this movie is not funny. It is legitimately really funny. I just didn't think it all needed to be in there, and I wish they toned down the humor and allowed the more dramatic elements of the film to exist, because that's what Ragnarok does so well, and I don't mean to compare it to Ragnarok, but it's just such an easy comparison to make, and one that everyone is going to make. Ragnarok to me has a perfect blend of this. This one feels way closer to like 70-30, where the other one was maybe 60-40, so it was much more toned in its presentation. The other thing that I also mentioned a little earlier is how this movie feels like it's a few movies in one. I would say specifically it's like 3.5 movies in one. You have the Jane Foster becoming the mighty Thor, you have the Gore the God Butcher's storyline, and you had the Zeus and the gods to set up Hercules. And then if you kind of wanted to throw it in there, you could call a little bit of the Asgardians of the Galaxy, which people were hoping for post Infinity War and Endgame, is also in there. I think what's funny is all of those ideas could have been a great movie. A Jane Foster becoming the mighty Thor could have been a great fourth movie. Maybe the Hercules stuff was a fifth. Maybe Gore the God Butcher to kind of end it all, or something in that order. Maybe you get a little bit of Asgardians of the Galaxy throughout. This one, it's all just in there. I think it's this is the weird thing where I have with criticism, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out how I process this. Expectations should not matter or color my review, but it's also a weird thing when somebody doesn't build upon the expectations that they themselves have given you. And I'm talking about the Asgardians of the Galaxy. They really do set it up as Avengers Endgame, like we are going to get these characters spending time together. You liked it so much in Infinity War. Get ready for more of this, where they're going to go on a really cool adventure where it's just kind of the mix of Thor and Guardians tones the gun and Watiti meeting. This one, it's not. They're literally the scenes that they are in the movie. They're all in the trailers. So one, I hate when trailers just give away that, but I understand that's a part of marketing. But yeah, it did kind of feel like they're just giving us everything. And it's not even giving us everything, but it's more of the fact like they had this movie, they set up these expectations, and they kind of pull it away within the first 5 minutes. So you're going to leave audiences a little disappointed. Had you not even set up that point, people wouldn't have that point of contention. It's like the whole Snoke thing. And I hate going into the Last Jedi debate. people know I'm a pretty big defender of that movie. But the thing with The Last Jedi that I will contend is a valid criticism is JJ clearly sets up Snoke to be something, and then Ryan says he's nothing important and it doesn't matter. And it's just like, but the issue is JJ really does set it up to be a secret, and it's some sort of reveal. It feels like a reveal that just never comes to conclusion. So it's just the issue of, well, okay, that's what you guys told me it's going to be. And then when it doesn't happen, I'm just left like, what was the point of that? And I'm a little underwhelmed. That was kind of how I felt about the as Guardians of the Galaxy thing at the beginning, but not a huge criticism. God, the part of the movie I dislike the most is the Zeus and Hercules part. That scene where they're in the city, which I'm blanking on the name of the city, it's literally there for Zeus to set up Hercules, the post-credit scene. It feels like a scene that is a note from a studio saying, we want to introduce Brett Goldstein as Hercules. Can you make sure they get to the city and they set up Zeus a little bit for a future installment? That might have not been the case. Maybe Waititi wanting to do more with that in Love and Thunder. There's supposedly a 4.5 hour cut of this film, so maybe the Zeus storyline is played out way more. But that's what it felt like in this movie, and it was just something that I was just like, there's no real point of this city. They go there, they have this adventure, and then nothing becomes of it, really. He gets the Thunderbolt, which is so unimportant, and I'll get to that later, my issues with the Thunderbolt. But yeah, this whole scene didn't work for me. I thought Russell Crowe was really, like, just too much hamming it up. I don't mind the fact that he wasn't this all-powerful god like some of the mythology has built him up to be, or how we see Zeus in films like Clash of the Titans or even Hercules. I like that they made him the butt of the joke. But it was the issue of just straight up Russell Crowe is too much. The accent's a little too ridiculous. The beard looks really dumb. The whole walking down the stairs with the skirt, funny, just didn't necessarily need it. There were ways to find that balance of this guy's a joke and also this guy's giving a good performance. And this was very much like, Russell, do whatever you want in it. And it just didn't work for me. It was way too I felt like improvisational in its tone and just the way he presented himself. There needed to be something toned back a little bit with that scene because it just became so overly ridiculous. It felt like a parody of itself, which that's what the MCU has been really good at not doing. There is humor in those films for sure. There's a lot of humor in those films for sure, actually. But they never feel like they're self-defecating themselves. This one, it was like, yeah, this is a joke, and we know it's a joke, and it's pretty dumb. I didn't like that they went full on for that. So yeah, there's, like I said, these 3 movies in one. The Jane Foster should have been its own film. The gore stuff definitely should have been in its own film because it's the cast is so underutilized. And I think for the most part, the cast does a great job. I already gave credit to Bale. He's the best part of this movie, but there's other people who come to play in a really strong way. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie is wonderful in this movie. I think she's delightful in every MCU appearance she's been in. I think she's a great screen presence. I really love that character. She's just so underutilized in this film. I wanted to see more of her. I wish they gave more of her to do. I wish they didn't just injure her and then not have her in the final battle. So yeah, I wanted more from that character, but it is really good. And I think for the most part, the cast does a really good job. Hemsworth is doing exactly what he is told to do. I don't necessarily like the characterization of Thor. We've now had it at this point where Thor, his arc is basically the same, repeat after repeat. It is, who am I? Am I worthy? What is my role in all of this? He's just always lost, and by the end of the film, he always seems to be found. And so it's like, the first Thor film, his quest is to be worthy. It's then Avengers, Thor being on a team, Thor having to basically deal with the aftermaths of learning that his father's empire is a lie and that he has this genocidal sister, Loki's death in Infinity War, his mother's death in the Dark World, all of this. And it's the same beats over and over again. And I feel like it's that way in this movie. Who is Thor? What is he post Endgame? Oh, he doesn't feel like he has purpose or know who he is or doesn't feel worthy of his powers and just is struggling. And again, human struggle, I'm not criticizing necessarily that. It's just that it feels like it's repeat after repeat after repeat with this idea of who Thor is, and their way of developing it is always this guy is in the rut and he has to climb himself out of it and discover that who he is. And one of my biggest issues with that is in the Thunderbolt, which I previously mentioned as being an issue. The whole point of Ragnarok is that the power is within him. He's not the god of hammers. He is the god of thunder. And then Infinity War Endgame, I didn't like how they did it in Infinity War either, where his whole quest is I need to get a weapon powerful enough to kill Thanos. I thought you are the weapon supposed to be powerful enough, but whatever, Stormbreaker was cool enough, and it leads to the greatest entrance within the MCU, which is Thor landing in Wakanda. The Thunderbolt is the same issue. This doesn't feel like it makes him any more powerful. It's not this weapon that is this, it's the weapon legendary enough to beat Gore. It's like his antithesis, whatever it is. That's not what it is in this movie. It is straight up just a thunderbolt that kind of seems to utilize the same movesets and powers that Thor does. So it's like, why even need the thunderbolt? It just kind of feels like, I wouldn't necessarily say a MacGuffin, but it just feels like, oh, we need the hero's quest to go get a weapon to go kill the bad guy. It felt lazy to me. I didn't particularly love this. But yeah, he gives a good performance. Chris Hemsworth's really funny. He only continues to prove that he is great at comedy, and I totally understand why he wanted to make this type of movie and present himself in this way, because he's really good in this. And I think he has a really good on-screen chemistry with Natalie Portman, who I took a little bit of issue with in this film. Natalie Portman is a really great actress, but being a really great actress does not mean you are a great movie star. The movies that work for Natalie Portman are the films like Black Swan. They're the films, why am I having trouble thinking of her filmography right now? But it's the ones that go much deeper, they're much more psychological. They tend to have a little bit of really just prestige to them. I don't think she's necessarily the best movie star actress, and here's how I'll define it. An actor can be great, but that doesn't mean they can lead a movie. Lead a blockbuster 150 million plus movie. I think Hemsworth can. I don't think Portman has proven that she can. I think the issue with Portman, and that's again not to say that she hasn't had films that have opened up like that, but they tend to be, in my opinion, some of her weakest films, with the exception for V for Vendetta, which I think gets to have that perfect blend of a much darker, deeper character that is explored and has a lot more themes to say about society, corruption, really just a great forecast of what the future was going to hold. But then there's other films like her in the Star Wars trilogy, the prequel trilogy, or her in the first two Thor films, and even this one to an extent. Or I'm trying to think of some of the other big budget movies. Our Highness, where she's really trying to show off that comedic sensibility with a broadcast to kind of get on the Apatow, James Franco, Seth Rogen comedy train. I don't necessarily think that's what she's good at. And for these movies in particular, you have to be so broadly appealing and so outwardly charismatic. And just because you're a good actress does not mean you're outwardly charismatic the same way that somebody who's going to make $200 million opening weekend. Tom Cruise is not the best actor. He's the best movie star. There is a difference with that. And I think one of the easiest ways to tell that is, can they deliver bad jokes or just very cheesy lines that are supposed to kind of be crowd pleasers that would fall flat if they weren't the ones delivering that. A movie star can kind of get away with delivering a broad, cheesy, bad joke, and I don't think Portman can do that. So, but again, that's not necessarily a criticism of her. I just don't think her performance as Jane Foster is anything to write home about. Portman has much better performances in her actual career, and she will not be known for the character quite to the same extent that Chris Hemsworth will be known as Thor, for better or for worse. Thompson, on the other hand, Tessa Thompson, kind of hits that perfect blend of she's a really great actress, but she's also a really good movie star. She is able to deliver some of those lame jokes in the movie. The whole scene where she pulls out a speaker and she's just kind of dancing for it. It's a really good beat, but specifically because of how good Tessa plays it, less of how good Portman plays it. So I just think there is a extent of you can be a movie star and a good actress, a good actor, actress, or you can also be vice versa, a good actor, actress, not a great movie star. And there's some who are able to do it both. And I think Portman definitely falls more into they are a good actor, not necessarily a movie star. But yeah, with that all said, I think another issue is they try to make Jane Foster fall into that camp of kind of all the other characters. She's hamming it up. She's doing a lot of jokes in this movie. A lot of the jokes I didn't find particularly funny, and that's kind of supposed to be the point. The fact that she's like, eat my hammer, all these like trying to figure out her catchphrase. It's a joke that just never fully works for me. But the issue is that they're giving her these jokes. You just don't need to give every character a comedic beat. The MCU is so ingrained with the RDJ, Robert Downey Jr. of it all, that it worked with Iron Man. It just worked when we let Robert Downey Jr. be funny. What if we kind of continued that? And that's been how the humor has been built off in the MCU. Look at the creators on this. It's a very improvisational comedy background. I mean, the Russo brothers with Dan Harmon on Community, Arrested Development, then them getting to do their own MCU films with Winter Soldier and Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. But they're students of Harmon. And Dan Harmon, of course, being the creator of Rick and Morty, the fact that they're really buying into this weird multiverse, time travel, broad comedy, not even broad comedy, but just all these themes that Harmon has been hitting on so long for his career. You feel the harmonization of the MCU as well as the RDJ effect, which just makes all these characters very comedic when not necessarily needed to. Now, the counterpoint is that the Eternals film was not crazy comedic. They had funny characters in the movie, but it was not supposed to be laugh out loud. It was supposed to take itself more serious, and that movie has a bad reception. But in this film, like I said, Thor is there to set up jokes, give punchlines, or I guess it's vice versa, set up punchlines, deliver jokes, and it's, like I said, it's very similar to all the other cast members in there, MCU. Ant-Man does that. Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man did that. You have Drax the Destroyer, Star-Lord, Doctor Strange was doing that with Multiverse of Madness. The Illuminati, which is just you don't know the word Illuminati. Even if you don't exactly understand what it is in this context, you've never heard the word Illuminati. You have Hulk just kind of delivering punchlines. You have Mantis, all these characters, just their role is to really not their only role, but they have a large part of their job is to just deliver jokes in a good comedic timing. And in that case, Thor does it really well, but it's every character has to do that. And that's kind of what Jane Foster's saddled with. She has to deliver these jokes because it's kind of just expected. This is the Marvel format now. And like I said, the humor, I laughed pretty hard at a few of the jokes. There were some really great jokes in there. I thought I was listening to Harloff's review of this film. Christian Harloff from the Schmoes Knows, one of my favorite reviewers has always been. I disagreed with him on some of his takes for this movie. He had this issue with the Lady Sif line where she's like, "Let me die in battle so I can go to Valhalla," and then he's like, "Well, actually, your arm would go to Valhalla." I thought that joke was crazy funny, and I didn't think it particularly undermined the humor or drama of that scene. I should say, not humor, but there are scenes like that where the humor is very overbearing, and I get why someone wouldn't like that. I like that joke quite a bit, but I understand why he had a problem with it. That's just not one of the jokes I had a problem with. But my issue with the jokes was they were just so. Every character had to be a jokester. Korg, Valkyrie, Thor, Jane Foster, uh, even Christian Bale to an extent, but his jokes are so darkly comedic that it worked for me. But I mean, Russell Crowe had to do it in this film. Matt Damon for just his brief cameo. Like I said, everyone's going for a punchline. Uh, Funny enough is the humor that actually worked the best for me was the one that wasn't supposed to be the broad, like, cheerful comedy. It is solely the Bale, like, doing this whole thing with the snake and pulling off its head and throwing at the kids and just like being like the worst and scariest guy. There's some really dark humor in those scenes, and I really like those moments of it. And I thought those were the ones that worked better instead of the jokes like uh, Korg and Thor being skate buddies, skaters for life, Thor going through the roof. The one that bothered me the most, and I don't know why it bothered me because I was talking about it with my mom. The Jane Foster like stage 4 cancer joke I thought was really bad. And my initial issue was the fact of like she's an astrophysicist. She's supposed to be one of the smartest women alive, one of the smartest people alive, I should say. And she doesn't like, she's like, oh, out of how many stages? And then Kat Dennings comes in there. Kat Dennings, who's very underutilized in this film, is like, there's four stages. I get that that's supposed to be her kind of acknowledging that this is a dark situation and that she's trying to make light of it. But it was just like, why couldn't you let the drama of that scene stand a little bit and just not have Jane Foster trying to be funny in those scenes? Why couldn't you just accept that these characters can be naturally charismatic and likable, and that can make for enough of a lighthearted tone when you need the film to be lighthearted without reminding us like, oh, they're also funny. That's where I had the issues with the comedy for sure. And I think a lot of this comes into play because everything about this film feels rushed, from its screenplay, from its effects to its direction to just everything about this. Why did Disney mandate that this film needed to be under 2 hours? Because I read that Disney was the one really wanting to make sure that this film came out at about 2 hours. Why? They've had so many films that have been proven, like Avengers Endgame is one of the hugest films of all time, and it's $300 million. Spider-Man No Way Home was like 2 hours and 40. I think some of the Captain America films were like 2.5 hours. Like, you didn't have to make this film 2 hours. And it just felt like there was missing so much context and stuff within this film. And also, why did they continue filming during COVID? It's something I'll never understand why they did that. There's literally the scenes that I talked about in my review last time where it's someone talking. Let me get the demonstration again. I'll use Hito again like I used him last week. I'm talking to Hito, but Hito's head is turned like this. So it's only the back of his head that I'm seeing. So it's a clear thing that they're not in the same shot. It's clearly two scenes stitched together is what it feels like. And then vice versa. There's a scene where maybe now Hito's facing the audience and my head is to the back. It's scenes like that. It's those scenes where I'm just like, oh, you could tell it was shot during COVID. And I'm just like, you couldn't have delayed it? Like, we have so much Marvel property, which we'll get into that one in a second because that's a big thing about Marvel right now is how much is coming out. But yeah, there was just, I wish they took their time with this. And that's, again, going to be a big point of one of my points for the issues with the MCU. Uh, and when everything feels rushed, that can make the special effects, I feel like, are one of the easiest places to tell where something's been uh, not fully rendered or CGI or it looks good. There's been those screen caps of like Heimdall's kid floating in the air and it looks bad. And there's been criticisms of this film CGI, ones that I even threw at this film. I will say this film is not actually as bad as I thought it looked. Upon seeing it the second time, I actually thought it wasn't as bad as I remembered, and there were certain scenes where I'm like, oh, this is about to look really bad. And it just looked fine. It didn't look great. It was I think, really my summation of my point was you have like $200 million plus on it, and this doesn't look top notch. Is shocking to me. But it's not as bad as everyone sees. That scene with Heimdall's kid, I didn't even notice it the first time. I then saw the discourse on it online, and then I'm like, oh, I didn't realize it looked that bad. Then I saw it again in theaters the second time. It actually did not look that bad. It's a screenshot. Someone is taking their phone, unfocused, into a dark theater and taking a picture of the moving screen at a low angle because they're sitting down like on the floor and it's like pointing up and it looks bad. Like, yeah, it's not going to look great. No photo is going to look particularly great with that angle and all of that. So that was definitely a huge overreaction that I saw on the internet. Or even like the scene where Thor is just like leaving a hospital and he suits up and goes up to fight Gore, and he's just like in this green, empty hospital looking place, just the green area right outside a hospital. And people are like, look at that versus like a film like RRR, which I loved. I loved RRR. But it's just like, look at what $70 million did versus $200 million. I understand the sentiment. Like I said, I didn't think this film looked $200 million, but they're also comparing a very visually rich scene in RRR versus just a scene where Thor is literally leaving a boring looking hospital and it just looks like a hospital. I have hospitals at my in my neighborhood that look exactly like that. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just green. Sometimes like that's just what they look like. And so to take that scene and be like, this is proof that Marvel does not know how to spend its money. I'm just like, you're reaching there. You're really reaching. And yeah, like I said, there's people who are always going to attack that. It got then worse when that game, was it Gamer? I think it was Gamer was the company or the publication that put out that story about the MCU VFX workers who were basically, we never want to work with Marvel. They're some of the worst. They're always time crunched. We always like have to just do it so quick. We never get the proper time. They're so stressful. We have to work long hours. We're not getting paid fairly. All of that stuff. So it was an easy dunking, or what is it? Dunking bag? No, it wouldn't be dunking bag, but it was an easy punching bag. We'll just use the word punching bag instead. It was an easy punching bag that was then expanded on to prove a point. And I get what people are trying to do. But again, like, that scene doesn't actually look that bad. Like, I'm not going to say it looks great. It also doesn't look bad. So it was just one of those easy shots to take at the movie that I don't necessarily think was justified or fair. But there were scenes that I did specifically think looked bad. I thought the first battle was overly cheesy, and I know that's the point. But just how it looked so generic to every other MCU film. You've seen it in Captain Marvel, you've seen it in Guardians, you've seen it in the other Thor films, you've seen it in just films like, or TV shows like Loki, you've seen it before. Thor meeting the mighty Thor just at night just didn't look great with the hammer like flying around, and like them both suiting up. The helmets in particular just looked bad in this film. Like the fact that why aren't they just giving these actors real helmets to wear on set? Why are they like CGIing hammers on? It looks stupid. It looks really dumb. Give them real costumes, Marvel. You can afford it. But yeah, so that's just like I said. That's some of the things about this film. The special effects have been a really big driving point on Twitter. And again, Twitter's not a real place. It doesn't matter. No one thinks the way Twitter does. It's so reactionary. It's so terrible, in all honesty. Like I said, the Twitter discourse is bad. Like, the on-set behavior, people calling him a POS for divorcing his wife. Like I said, people going from loving him to hating him. There's a group of people that were clearly ready to hate him and were looking for any chance, and it's just serving their agenda. I already talked about the person that I'm doing this. They do this with every person in the MCU. Raimi just got it with Doctor Strange. Watts has been getting it with Spider-Man No Way Home. The Russos have been called talentless and just can't direct after just being critically loved for Captain Winter Soldier and Civil War and then the Avengers films. They were like, people were applauding the style that they brought to Winter Soldier. Like, these are some of the best hand-to-hand combat scenes. And now it's like, can these guys even direct? Shut up. Shut up. You literally don't have a valid opinion. You wouldn't know direction if it hit you in the face. I'm sorry. Like, you cannot like their style, but don't pretend that this wasn't, one, popular, which popularity is not a metric for good. But let's not pretend people weren't praising this. Let's not pretend that this action wasn't revolutionary. Let's not just pretend that these guys have no talent. That's the thing that shocks me when I hear like John Watts has no talent. Really, he's made some pretty big films that have been pretty well received for their action moments and for their humor and their story. So please don't just give me this type of crap. You can dislike it. That is completely your right. And you cannot like their directing style. To say that they are so bad at their job and that they're ruining the film industry, you have problems with superheroes in Hollywood, not with the directors themselves. You're trying to make a self-serving point, or you're trying to prop up someone like Zack Snyder with the whole DCU thing. I'm going to get shit on in the comments. I'm not ready for it. I just brought up Zack Snyder. Let's just Johnny Depp, Donald Trump. I'll just use all the words that are just going to trigger people. Father Stu, weirdly enough, that one triggered a lot of people in my comment sections. Shout out to all of you. But yeah, like I said, James Gunn's been getting it. In fairness, the Gunn one's a really weird situation that I will not jump into. Favreau got it. People forgot how much shit Favreau had to eat after Iron Man 2 and Cowboys and Aliens coming out within 1 year of each other. Now he's like considered like this god amongst fans. But back then it was just like, oh, he made Iron Man, but he's not that good of a director anymore. Peyton Reed with the Ant-Man films because he replaced Edgar Wright, the god of all nerdy stuff. Like I said, they've all received the criticism. Chloe Zhao, if I forgot to mention her, literally won an Oscar for her direction, and then people are like, this woman cannot direct a film. Maybe watch more than 5 films a year. Maybe watch any other film that is not a superhero film or a $200 million film and actually get an idea of how talented some of these people are. But regardless, whatever. But like I said, they're getting it. Simu Lee has been getting it recently. I've seen Chris Pratt get it. No one's gotten it harder than Brie Larson. Literally, I don't know if anyone in the MCU has had to take the amount of crap she's gotten, and went from literally one of the most popular actresses and one of our best working actress I quite love, and has just gone from she's the worst actress and she's also the devil, which is an interesting development for her. She's actually literally the worst person in the world. I would equate her to Hitler, is what the some people online are saying about Larson. Like I said, they're a bunch of right-wing babies, trolls, who are just looking for a reaction, just want to hate women. Anyway, that's my rant on Twitter. I went off on a huge tangent there. But yeah, it is all to say that Taika has been, like I said, the fact that Taika is being called a hack for, like I said, a film I don't necessarily love. I think it's fine. I think it's good, but I don't have much feelings about it. This is far from his best work. I feel safe saying that. I think the humor is very overbearing. I think it's totally inconsistent, and I think it does have a lot of underutilized characters. But there's also literally scenes in the film where you watch and I'm like, that's proof of really good direction in there. The scene where where the screen just goes from color to black and white when they get to closer to Gore's planet, that scene's great. It looks so beautiful. It's so perfectly lit. It's pretty visually stunning, and it's a very visually interesting scene, and one that we haven't seen in the MCU. So yeah, for everything good in this film, there's also bad, and for everything bad, there's also good. I think films are allowed to exist in the middle, but apparently that's not a discussion worth having. I believe it is, so I'll continue having it though. I think the ending of this film is really what saves the film for me. I think the last, probably, what is it, like 45 minutes of the film are legitimately great, from when Thor and Jane Foster are on the boat when they have their first kiss again, to the Gore, the God Butcher, are on the black and white planet, to then him getting it. I know some people didn't like the kids getting the power. I thought it worked pretty well. I thought it was a good scene. It really did symbolize the idea of like Thor had to kind of let go of his powers and just accept that he needed other people in his life to help him. And yeah, I thought it all built to a really emotional finale where I liked the final scenes with Jane Foster and Thor. I thought it was a really sweet moment. I loved the Gore, the God Butcher, and the child scene. I thought Bale acted his ass off in that scene. It makes a kind of undercooked idea really brought to life. And yeah, it's a lot of that stuff really worked well. I don't know if Gore the God Butcher's daughter, Love, who then becomes Love and Thunder with Thor after Jane Foster dies. I don't know if the film necessarily built to the idea of like Thor was missing something and was always being a father. But again, it kind of feels undercooked like a lot of the other ideas in this film. But I liked it. I thought it was a really sweet end and it got me choked up. I thought it was really good. The second post-credit scene you don't need to see. I actually think it kind of devalued the ending of Jane Foster that we had. Us literally seeing her get to Valhalla, I just didn't think that was necessary. The Brett Goldstein, I really like the casting actually of Goldstein from Ted Lasso as Hercules. I just didn't, like I said, that whole scene with Zeus and them in the one city is just literally to set up that post-credit scene, and the MCU's been doing that heavily. Recently with, like I said, Charlize Theron just being introduced at the end of Doctor Strange 2, Harry Styles being introduced at the end of Eternals. It's literally, here's the casting calls that we've had, or the casting announcements, not casting calls, the casting announcements. And so here it is. Instead of us just like tweeting a picture, you seeing them at Comic-Con, they're in the film, they're in the costume. When are they ever going to appear on screen? Like, when are we actually going to see Charlize Theron on film? When are we actually going to see Harry Styles? I mean, it could be in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I'd probably bet not, but it could be. When are we actually getting the Brett Goldstein movie? / are we ever going to get these movies with the huge slate that's going to come out? It just sets up a lot of issues. I liked it more when it was like Thor the Dark World has a tease for Wanda and her brother Pietro. And again, I don't remember if that was actually Thor the Dark World 2 or Thor the Dark World. But I like it more when it's like, this is setting up the film you're going to see next. For instance, I thought the Eternals one, where they're set up Jon Snow to be in the Blade film, which is like, okay, Blade's going to come out pretty soon. That's a good tease. That's enough to get you excited. You know that film is coming, which means we know Jon Snow will be in that film. Kit Harington's real. I could not think of it there for a second. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Thor, Love, and Thunder. And with that said, let's talk about the biggest problems within the MCU currently. These are the issues that I isolated that I just think if they continue going this way, the MCU is in real trouble. Some of them I think are more legitimate than others. Some of them are just kind of unfair criticisms to put on them, but criticisms nonetheless. So we'll get into all of them. I believe in total, let me just double check. Yep, I do have 7. So we're going to jump into that. And we are back. Thank you for sticking around. And let's just get into the biggest problems I see facing the MCU in the future. So these are the 7 biggest issues within the MCU currently. The first one, and I'll just do these pretty rapid fire because a lot of these points I actually already touched on in my spoiler review, but I'll kind of reiterate or expand on them. The first one is these movies make billions of dollars. Disney makes billions of dollars every day with the parks. This studio is not in danger of losing its money and running out with the just amount of merchandising they're able to achieve. Make the movies look great. How do these films not look great? How does the MCU have piss poor special effects at times? I'm not going to say you're going to swing and hit 100% of the time, but the fact that sometimes these movies look a little cheap or just poorly made is just bad. It's not good. It actually really devalues the brand. And this is specifically, you're seeing it a lot in the TV shows. Some of these TV shows are not looking good. I like Miss Marvel a lot. Some of the special effects are not great in there. And Moon Knight, which I thought was good, has some of the worst special effects I've seen in recent memory. Like I said, it's just, you have the money, spend it. Make these films look great. Even if people don't love the visual style, make sure it looks like $200 million were spent on screen and you know where the money went. I wonder if the money actually goes more to the cast members. Like, you just have to pay Chris Hemsworth such a hefty fee. Like, I know when Robert Downey Jr. was basically just making random appearances within, I think he got like $50 million for Spider-Man Homecoming. Like, that's a huge amount of its budget allocated towards one actor. I'm just curious, maybe that is an issue. But regardless, if you're going to pay the actors, also make sure you're paying them and pay the VFX artists. This is ridiculous that stories come out and Disney is cheap. Just, what are you doing? It's just really lame. It's really stupid. It's shockingly offensive, actually. My second point, and again, I hit this pretty hard in it, my review, so I'm not going to go heavy on it. Tone down the humor. I was just looking at some of the projects in Phase 4. Shang-Chi, Moon Knight, Black Widow, Thor 4, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. These films are all heavy in their humor. And like, these are more serious properties. And then let's not then forget about like the ones that are supposed to be more comedic, like Spider-Man, like a Loki, like a Miss Marvel. It's just all so heavy in its humor. It's one, make the humor more variety. Don't make it feel like the same type of jokes are in each movie. There was this cutscene done for the honest trailers for, I think it was Doctor Strange 2, where it's the same type of punchline where it's somebody like laughing at the name of a character for having a ridiculous name, like, oh, Doctor Strange, are using our made up names. Oh, your name's Taserface, haha. Oh, the Illumawati, just all these jokes like back to back to back, and the scene goes on for like, feels like a good minute, maybe it's only like 30 seconds, but regardless, you're just sitting there and you're like, yeah, that joke is repeated quite often in the MCU. Yeah, it is. Like I said, make the humor one variety, make it variety, so do more different types of comedy, and also just like tone down on the comedy. It's okay if a film's serious. People are still going to like the film. 3, this one's the one I had trouble exactly defining, but I'm going to say that the MCU just needs more movie stars. There's this weird thing where all the actors currently in the MCU just feel like essentially just their characters. It's like we only know them for their characters. There's very few like defined movie stars where they're just in a ton of projects. They know their brand. They have their own brand outside of the MCU. Ruffalo for his more prestigious work. Chris Pratt, is the king of IP right now. You could argue, is Pratt actually a movie star or is he just making IP-centric films? But you have Zoe Saldana, I put Tom Holland in a question mark because yes, he technically he was the lead in a film like Uncharted, but that film one isn't particularly good, but also two, that's also just a very IP brand. Uh, Brie Larson, I would argue, is a star. Chris Hemsworth, I would argue, is a star. The rest of them, it's just like they don't have like Gemma Chan, Simu Lee, uh, a lot of the characters in the MCU. Like I would define Oscar Isaac, I think, is a legitimate star, but I would definitely say while Tatiana Maslany is a great choice for She-Hulk, it's not like she's a star. It's not like Jamia Jamil is a star in that show. It's not like Iman Avrali. I've mispronounced the name and I do apologize for that. I could not remember it. But the woman who plays, or the young girl who plays Miss Marvel, it's not like she's a star. It's Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stans aren't particularly big stars. I just feel like you need a little bit more people in more solidified reasons to get other people who aren't familiar with the MCU to come in, where it's just like a Joaquin Phoenix even is a great example of like when he was supposedly cast as Doctor Strange before Benedict Cumberbatch. That is a great example of getting an actor in the films that people who aren't the biggest MCU fans are still like, Joaquin Phoenix, one of my favorite actors, is working in an MCU film. I should go check that film out. Or even like having Robert Redford in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. It's like, oh, that's Captain. That's Butch Cassidy. That's from, that's All the President's Men. Like, that's a legitimate, like, great actor that I've loved, who I've respected their work for many years. I love all their films. Get actors like that I think get the excitement a little bit more. I feel like you need unknowns, and I think those are ultimately who are going to really pop off, like the next Chris Evans, the next Chris Hemsworth, even to a degree, like the next Chris Pratt. Those are all going to be guys who you end up finding. Simu Lee, I think, is going to be a huge actor. But like I said, they're so right now known for only being this that people don't know them if they're not watching the MCU films. So I think you need a variety of that. And again, this point isn't fully well defined because then you also had Angelina Jolie in the Eternals. She's one of the hugest stars in the world. And I also feel like this point is going to solve itself in the next few years. I mean, Mahershala Ali is definitely one of those guys I'm talking about where it's like, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say the films that he's made have had a huge crossover with the films of like comic books or superheroes. So I feel like that's going to bring in a new audience that is going to get excited. I think Boseman was also a great example of that. Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler with Krieg and Fruitvale Station, I think were great examples of that. Unfortunately, Black Panther has the issue, the sequel, I should say, Wakanda Forever, has the issue of just, it's something so unfortunate where Boseman's no longer with us, because I feel like he was legitimately one of those stars that I'm talking about who had a career outside of the MCU, but I think you need more guys like that. Bringing in Christian Bale was a great move by Marvel, but I think you need more of those shocking big names in it where it's just like, these are projects that people are willing to get into. I'm not saying like bring in a Leonardo DiCaprio movie star or anything like that. That doesn't seem realistic. But I am saying get bigger actors like that people have a respect towards and just aren't always lined up with the same audience. Because honestly, some of this next criticism I is going to have, where you're just letting, and this is my fourth point, you're just letting the fans cast your movies. It's not going to work for you in the long run. One, the audience for Krasinski being in the MCU feels like also largely the audience that was calling for him to be in the MCU. So it's like, one, you're not going to bring over a huge crossover in there. I'm sure you'll get some Office fans of very respectable work with the Quiet Place films, but it was like the obvious choice for that. Emily, the issue is like, and it's the issue that I've been balancing with John Krasinski in the MCU as Mr. Fantastic, if he ends up being Mr. Fantastic. I didn't particularly like him in Doctor Strange. I think he came off a little bit just too dumb in the movie. I heard this point Griffin Newman on the Blank Check podcast made about him as Fantastic. And it's the idea of like, for those who don't know, Krasinski was almost cast as Captain America before Chris Evans got the role, and it was the idea of like, you fundamentally don't understand the character of Mr. Fantastic if you are just truly believing based on a fan cast. Like, a fan is believing like, oh yeah, this guy's sensibilities make him a great choice to play Reed Richards in the MCU. You don't understand who the character of Captain America is versus the character of who Reed Richards is. And of course, an actor can show range, an actor can do multitude of things, but when you're doing a fan cast like that, you're not thinking about that. You are purely thinking, he looks good in the costume, thus he makes the most logical sense. And it's like, maybe that's not the actor's strength, so you can't just rely on the fans casting it. Same with Charlize Theron. Excited that she's in the MCU. I think that's another great addition, but she is playing a character, Clea, in a Doctor Strange 3 movie, which who knows when it ever comes out. It's just like, okay, yeah, that seems like the step that she would have taken. It would have been maybe a little bit more cool if there was a Charlize Theron-centered project. Also, I'll just mention this. The weird thing with Krasinski that I forgot to mention is like, yeah, as I don't love him as Reed Richards, I do love the idea of Emily Blunt in the MCU as Invisible Woman. Of course, again, the issue with that is Reed Richards has always been the much more interesting character, and they've never really known what to do with Invisible Woman in comic books. I mean, just even look at Hickman's run, which is one of the most critically acclaimed Fantastic Four runs of all time. It's a Reed Richards comic, and all the other characters are there. So I'm just like, yeah, Blunt's. If you get Krasinski and then you get Blunt as Invisible Woman, great caster. If you get her as Sue Storm, Sue Storm, that is her name, in it, great get. But it's also like that character just doesn't need to be the much as the focal point as Reed Richards will have to be in the MCU. He'll have to carry a bigger weight because of who Reed Richards is in the comics. So like I said, Charlize Theron, kind of the same thing, where it's like, I'd be more excited if you told me Theron was playing like a lead and not like a co-star in the next Doctor Strange movie, which will come out in however many years. Doesn't really get me excited. Brett Goldstein as Hercules. Again, the same thing where it's like, I'm very excited for that. I like Ted Lasso, and I'm sure we'll bring in people who are fans of Ted Lasso into the MCU, but I don't know how big of a crossover audience that is going to be. And again, it's this weird theoretical thing of like, when are we even going to get the next Thor movie and see Hercules? Really, it's not like Hercules is a big character in that. Like, if you had told me Brett Goldstein is like Wolverine, and I think he might be a little bit too similar, but if you told me a name like that, I'd be instantly more intrigued than a character that who knows when we get to see him. I will say though, some of the this one's not even a fan cast, but it is one of those cameos that I talked about earlier, where it's just like, and this point could almost be more described as like just revealing your characters as a post-credit scene for a movie that we might, whenever we'll get it, but who knows when. But I will say Harry Styles as Star Fox was brilliant casting by the MCU. They got a whole new audience. That movie, of all these characters, of Clea, of Hercules, I can guarantee you will see Harry Styles as Star Fox soon enough, because that was the excitement for a lot of people, hearing that Harry Styles was going to be in it. That is a completely different audience that you will now be getting into the MCU with the Harry Styles fans, whose fans are ravenous. That's brilliant casting. That's the type of shocking thing where I'm talking about, where it's like, yeah, get someone like that who will also bring in their own audience and new crowd and keep the MCU more live, more exciting. That's the type of casting that I'm talking about. I do think the Harry Styles Star Fox, brilliant casting. So that's my fourth point. My fifth point is, again, a weird one, but one that I'm actually feeling more passionate about, is stop giving us the B-list characters. You know, it is cool to get these characters from time to time, but it feels like we're just getting so many of these characters that it's like, oh yeah, who really cares? Like, oh yeah, Clea, Hercules, and Star Fox, but then also just like Shang-Chi, the Eternals. Who's ever heard of the good classic Eternals comic run? Giving spin-offs to like even like Miss Marvel or She-Hulk or all of these things when X-Men are there, when Spider-Man's there, when Fantastic Four are there, when there's more to be done with Captain America, when there's a Hulk movie that still really should be made. All these things, and it's just like, these are the projects you're choosing to greenlight. We're going to talk about like an Echo TV show, Thunderbolts, like Agatha. Like, while I'm excited for some of those ideas, it's just like, what are you actually like? Give us like a Daredevil film or TV show, something like that, something more investing. With that also said, I guess I'm actually making it 8 points on this because I thought of one that I've been very passionate about that I'll just include now. It's my 6th point, which is stop making TV shows that are just long movies. It's been my issue with the MCU. It's been my issue with Star Wars. They are essentially just taking they are taking a show that is realistically, with the 6-episode structure that they've been doing in the miniseries, where it's each one is about 30 to 45 minutes, they're taking something that could be about 4.5 hours and just making it a TV show, when in reality they could just make a really great 3-hour movie. Moon Knight would be so much better if it was just a 2.5-hour movie. I think even Miss Marvel could benefit at times from being a 2.5-hour film. There's some that I understand you can't do. WandaVision, Loki, I think those are shows that needed to be in that format to tell that story the way they wanted to tell it. But then there's other stuff. Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think, would have been a really effective movie in just a 2-hour time span. But spending like week to week on these things that end up feeling disappointing, I just don't think it's working and paying off in dividends for them. They need to, one, tighten what they're doing with the TV shows, but also just like, don't be scared of making movies. I know you have to make stuff for Disney Plus, but even if you like, just give us more quality right now, because that's something that I feel like a lot of people are complaining about the Disney Plus shows, and it's the issue with TV. TV, as good as it is supposed to be. It is developed as a way to be consumed and then forgotten the next week, so you then watch the next episode and then the next episode. That's why these shows can last like 10 seasons. But it's not like everyone knows everything about those 10 seasons. As let's say everyone knows everything about Avengers Endgame. They're not supposed to be consumed in the same way. A TV has its own sensibilities, and a good TV show can be a great TV show, and a great movie can be a great movie. But that does not then mean if you then make a movie, you can't just take The Godfather, a great legendary movie of 3 hours, and then decide, but we're going to stretch that out to an 8-hour TV show and people are going to love it more. Sensibilities are not the same. You got to work with that, and that's what they're failing. They're literally just making movies that need to be edited straight up. Like, it's just like, this could have been better if you just edited it properly and made it a 2.5-hour movie. People would not have cared. Number 6. This one is actually, I've been saying like a do's. This is a don't. Don't take the wrong lessons on directors' creativity. I feel like they've had 3 weird films in a row for them. Or I guess they've had 4 films, but 3 out of the last 4 have been weird films for them. Chloe Zhao with Eternals, Sam Raimi with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and then Taika Waititi with Thor: Love and Thunder. I think there's going to be a weird effect with that, where executives are like, well, these creative directors, this critically acclaimed female director who just directed one of the most like stunningly naturalistic films in Nomadland, Sam Raimi, who's like one of the most notorious like directors with his own sensibilities, and Taika with his own just great sense of humor. Like, they're not clicking with audiences. We shouldn't give these types of projects to people like them. We need to go much more safer. We need to go like maybe like someone more studio, like a JJ, using JJ as the example here, but not actually like criticizing necessarily JJ. You got to let these directors be creative, and you got to just work in a way to make sure that like there is an understanding, this is the film that we need you to make, these are the agreements that have to be made. But then once there is agreed upon thing, we're not going to meddle in the film, we're going to let you make the film. That's what it felt like really in phase 3 with Waititi in Thor Ragnarok. They're like, we need you to hit certain beats, but then after that you can kind of do your own thing. The script is loose after some solidified points. This film felt like, no, there's plot points that are solidified, there's lines that are solidified, there are scenes that are solidified. You can kind of paint the jokes in between however you want. So don't take the wrong lessons from this. Don't stop getting interesting, unique directors. And this might be an issue that continues. Ryan Coogler has the most thankless job with Black Panther Wakanda Forever. He's coming off one of the most successful films of all time with Black Panther, but then he also has to deal with the unfortunate passing of Chadwick Boseman, which was not what he agreed to direct originally. I know this has to be a really stressful and hard project for him and the whole crew, especially with just dealing with the huge hole that Boseman does leave behind, and now trying to pay respect to his legacy while also making a great sequel to a great movie. That's a really hard task, and I'm pretty nervous about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I don't know if it's going to hit the mark. It's also, like I said, it's going to be a weird film to review and talk about, because you also just know that's the film that we're getting probably had to be rewritten like 100 times. So it's another film that you're just already anticipating rewrites. Again, goes back to my point earlier. Spread these movies out, give them some time to breathe, and if you have to reshape or rescrap or just even can a film for the time being, you have to accept that that's just sometimes the realities of making movies, and that it's not taking away Coogler's movie, but maybe it just has to be reshaped or just put on the shelf temporarily until they can work it out. My last point, this is my biggest point. It's the biggest issue I've had with the MCU. Stop diluting your own brand. Going through 2021, which is when we got the return of WandaVision after a 1.5-year hiatus from Spider-Man Far From Home, which of course we had the pandemic delay a bunch of stuff. Coming into 2022, here are all the projects that have been made and will be made. You're going to have Black Widow, which already came out, May of 2021, Shang-Chi, September of 21, Eternals, November of 21, No Way Home a month after Eternals in December of 21, Doctor Strange 2 in May of 2021, Thor Love and Thunder in July of 2022, and sorry, Doctor Strange 2 should have been 2022. Black Panther will be coming out November 2022. Then you had the TV shows which are coming out throughout those. So in January, you had WandaVision, which had 9 episodes, which meant its run went to, I believe, beginning of March, which means Black Widow was appearing and Falcon and the Winter Soldier was going to be coming. You also had Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming in March with 6 episodes, Loki in, I think it was May/end of June with 6 episodes. You had What If, which I believe was 8 episodes in August of 2021. You had Hawkeye, which was November and December of 2021. Moon Knight, which was March and April of 2022. Miss Marvel, which just finished its run right now. She-Hulk, which will be coming out in August and running through September. You'll have the holiday special, which I don't exactly know what that is, but that will be something on Disney Plus that will be coming out. The Halloween special, which will be coming out around Halloween time on Disney Plus. And then you have the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which will be coming out around Christmas time 2022. On top of that, I don't know if Secret Invasion is supposed to come out this year, but it could. But regardless, without Secret Invasion, that's 17 projects in the span of 24 months. That's close to 1.5, even close to 2 projects a month from Marvel. That's just too much, like legitimately just like too much. It's not actually close to 2. I didn't do the math on that. You could tell if anyone who can do math knows that. But regardless, that's just way too much coming out in such a fast period of time. Mixed with that, I just pulled up the 2023 list. So let's just go over the things that we know are in the MCU that have been announced. Ant-Man 3, which will come out in February 23. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which will come out in May of 2023. Then we don't have the release dates for any of these others, but they are supposed to come out in 2023. Actually, I think the Marvels is supposed to come out July 2023. Fantastic Four, I don't think that's going to make it to 2023. I have a feeling it will be closer to 2024. But maybe it does come out in 2023. but I know they did just lose their director with Watts in a few months ago. Armor Wars, the Wakanda TV show, Blade, which has to be pretty soon. Deadpool's with Ryan Reynolds will be coming. The Captain America movie with Anthony Mackie just got established as news this weekend, or I should say last weekend. Shang-Chi 2 is going to be coming out at some point. The Thunderbolts TV show, or I think that one's actually might be a movie. You have a Mutants movie, so some sort of X-Men Mutants tie-in. You'd also know that some other seasons are coming. We saw set photos from Loki season 2. Echo has been getting a lot of news with the Daredevil and Kingpin coming back, and it sounds like we could even get more of those characters of Jessica Jones. You have Agatha Harkness coming out, been announced at some point. The Spider-Man freshman year, which I believe is supposed to be 2023. Marvel Zombies, which was the spinoff to What If, which should be coming out. My guess, maybe even the end of this year, but probably beginning of 2023. What If Season 2, which I actually have a feeling they'll announce at Comic-Con this year to be coming out some point at the end of 2022. You also have a newly announced Daredevil Season 4, or some sort of continuation of Daredevil with Charlie Cox. You also have Nova TV show, and this one hasn't been announced, but you know it has to be coming, a Moon Knight continuation, whether that's a Season 2 or him in his own movie. So you know that has to be coming out. I believe I just listed more than 19 projects, and all of those are coming out in the future. And there's also going to be Comic-Con at the end of July, which I need to get ready for because I'll have to be reporting that news as it comes out, and I'll be doing reactions as that comes out. So that'll be a big one. But regardless, that's so many projects that are going to be coming out. And it's just like, breathe a little. Take time. You're saturating your own brand. There's too much coming out that you don't know how to deal with. And it's just, you're feeling the strains of filmmaking where it's just like their hands are in every direction and in every cookie pot that you just like, you don't have time to actually breathe or develop anything properly. And if you don't enjoy this project, well, hopefully they'll enjoy the next project. It's becoming disposable. And that's kind of the point of comic books if you think about it. Like, comic books are supposed to be read week to week to week, and then you forget about the next week, then you buy the new issues, then you remember about it, and then you forget about it, vice versa, and then you collect 1,000, and then you die eventually one day, as I plan on doing so proudly with my huge comic book collection. But that's the issue of it. Like, it is supposed to be like, oh, well, if you don't like this run of Spider-Man, then maybe you'll like Ultimate Spider-Man, or maybe you'll like Daredevil, or if you don't like Daredevil, maybe you'll like this Marvel Zombies run that's going on, or if Hickman has a great run with Fantastic Four, X-Men, the Avengers, or and there's a Doctor Doom. Oh, there's also this new continuation, blah, 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 until the world collapses one day. So yes, does it feel a little bit more comic books? Yes. And is that a weird thing for audiences to be grappling with? It very much is, because movies are supposed to feel a little bit more special, and they're starting to feel not as special. And it's also the issue of Disney's almost shooting themselves in the own foot, because and this is a weird point to bring up, but I'll still bring it up because I did think about it. The MCU and Star Wars are so similar right now. I feel like they're largely similar in tone, predictability, storytelling, the stories they're choosing to tell, the cast they're choosing to get. I mean, so many of them cross over, like the actors and actresses and directors are literally crossing over, and it almost feels like stepping ground for one another. And it's like they're almost playing within their own wheelhouse and using the same toys, just putting on different costumes for it. And what happens is now Star Wars, which I also feel like is oversaturated, is now blending into MCU, and MCU vice versa is also blending into Star Wars, and it's just making this fatigue come in even faster, where there's no separation of church and state, to put it bluntly, where it's just like it all just kind of feels the same. Disney's films, shows, Disney Plus projects, they're all feeling the same, and they're not working for me in that sense. Again, I've liked most of these projects. The only film I gave a bad review to in Phase 4 so far has been Black Widow. The rest I'm giving a positive score. If I was Rotten Tomatoes certified, they'd all have fresh reviews from me besides Black Widow. But it is just, look at some of the differences of, like, when I talk about Phase 3, which has multiple movies I love, and when I talk about Phase 4, which I'm really passionate. I think the Spider-Man No Way Home movie is really good. And then I think the other movies are good. I think they're good movies. They're not great. They're ranging from okay to good. And that's the issue, where there's just not as many huge films that I feel as passionate about because it's becoming so disposable. I don't have to feel as passionate about it. And if a film doesn't feel as special, I'll forget about it in a week or so when I'm watching the other film or one of the other thousands of superhero projects coming out. That's also the issue, and it's an unfair issue that they can never fix. Other studios are also still releasing their superhero projects. I mean, The Boys is one of the best superhero projects I've just seen, and it was running as the same time as a Thor movie being in theaters and Miss Marvel running, and maybe Kenobi, the last few weeks of Kenobi. So it was just so much of that. Then you also had Peacemaker. You had all the DC films that will be coming out. You have all their shows with Superman and Lois. You have Harley Quinn, which will be coming out later this month. You have their direct DVD. You have Invincible. You have Umbrella Academy. We're about to have Sandman soon. There's just so much of this comic book nerd superhero culture coming out that it's like, if I don't enjoy one thing, I'll probably enjoy the other. And it makes it kind of satisfying as a comic book fan, someone who's loved this medium for basically my whole life. It makes me excited to see these characters and stories told. But it's also just like, okay, but it's all so much that it really doesn't have a significance. Back like 10 years ago, like even looking at the slate of movies in 2011, a little bit over a decade ago, you look back at those movies and it's like the superhero films, X-Men First Class, Thor, Captain America, The First Avenger, which are the three Marvel movies, with one of them being a Fox Marvel movie. And I would only call the good one. I wouldn't even call any of them great. I think the only one that I would call really good and unique is X-Men First Class. I think the first Thor movie is solid, and I think Captain America, the First Avenger, is a bore. And then DCU has the Green Lantern film, which is kind of the last film before everything becomes cinematic universe. And then like even the next year, look at that slate of superhero films. You had Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, which I would say they don't make films like that. They don't make superhero films like that anymore, but Morbius came out this year disproving that theory, that yes, they can still make a terrible superhero film. But that year you also had The Avengers, which changed the industry. You also had The Amazing Spider-Man, which also changed the industry for different reasons. And then you had The Dark Knight Rises. But even then, I think that means 4, maybe 5 comic book superhero films being released versus this year, where I think, how many were we already at this year? I mean, there's already been 4. Is that right? We're going to have 4 MCU films. We're going to have The Batman. We're going to have Shazam 2. We're going to have Black Adam. There's a League of Super Pets. There's all the TV shows I'm forgetting about. And I'm sure there's a movie. There's Morbius, which I forgot about. It's just such an abundance. We're going to get probably 15 to 20 that make it, have some cultural relevance, others that are maybe not as popular, and like probably 10 of them that we'll see in theaters. We're upwards of probably 20 to 25 projects that are solely comic book / superhero related. It is just an overabundance of it. And like I said, it brings me a lot of fun, but it also makes me crave some new blood and new movies within this. It's a battle that will still be seen if it can be won, and I'm curious to see how they go with it. And there is no easy solution to any of this, but like I said, I think these 8 issues that I outlined are the 8 biggest issues facing the MCU, and the ones that need to be addressed soon before fatigue really sets in and these films start tanking a little bit more. And it's inevitable. At some point, the MCU will not be the most dominant thing movie-going experiences in our life. It's kind of being proved this year. Top Gun Maverick is $1.2 billion. It's probably going to be one of the biggest films of the year. Same with probably Avatar 2. It doesn't feel like the superhero films are going to dominate like they traditionally have. And that could be the start of a new chapter in Hollywood, where maybe these films aren't as culturally prominent as they have been in the past few years. But it also could be the case of this is just a weird phase for Marvel. Maybe they fix it up in phase 5 or even next year, and the next few movies just hit in a really special way. Black Panther 2 could be amazing and get another Oscar nomination like the first one. It could. I don't think it will, but it definitely could. It has the potential to do so. And like I said, it just leaves everything up in the air. But everything I just said two huge films in a row, two huge critically loved, critically praised films, big with audiences, big with fans. Like I said, they get that type of love. They're going to be the dominant force again, and everything I just said doesn't really matter. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the MCU, and that is this week's episode. So thank you for listening to burp there for a second. Thank you for listening to Ben and Bran See a Movie. I also just want to give a quick shout out. I just had a video that just hit, I believe it's at like 4.5k views right now with RRR, my review for that film. Thank you all to those who have been supporting, subscribing. My subscriber base has jumped. Everything, my engagement is just through the roof right now. I'm up like 2,000%. All that means the world to me. So I would just want to thank you all for doing that, for supporting me. And if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what you thought of Thor, Love and Thunder. And let me know what you think of the current state of the MCU and the problems and benefits and pros that you see within it. My name is Ben Friedman here from Ben and Bran See a Movie. Check back next week because on this show, Ben and Bran See a Movie, Chris Harris will be joining me and we will be talking the film Get Out in anticipation of Jordan Peele's new film Nope. And then the following week, Branson will be joining me in anticipation of the new DC Leagues of Super Pets. We're talking one of the classic DC animated films with Batman Mask of Phantasm. So we have a lot of great stuff coming at you end of this month. My name is Ben Friedman. Thank you all for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.